Well, hello, my friends. It's me, Mayleet, once again. I'm from the internet, which I'm sure you use given that you found me here. And I'm going to assume the majority of you are new, so hello to the new people. It's good to meet you. Once again, my name is May. I'm a total psychopath, and I watch horrible things for money. Now, I know if you're, like, from around here, you've seen my content in the past, then hello again. It's good to see you. I have in fact made a new list of awful things for your brain to interact with and then slowly decay. You deserve to know that I've been reading a lot of horrible literature recently, so I've just been reading the worst, most depressing books I've ever read in my whole life. So exciting! But today we are not talking about books. Lo, we could be talking about my book, Fluids, which now has a second print version. There's a link in the description. Also, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing as it helps my YouTube video hit the algorithm. Thank you. That has been all. No, today we're talking about fucked up documentaries. Documentaries that'll make you get the willies, poop yourself, or run screaming from the room. I have picked only the worst things that I could fathom to show you. There are obviously going to be things that you have seen that I have not seen. And also there are things that classify themselves as documentaries, though I feel most human beings with souls would challenge those ideas. I'm gonna call them remix films. Basically, people just like take a bunch of real footage of people getting hacked up and shit, and then just putting them in linear order, and then you watch it. I reject this as a documentary. Maybe I went to film school and got my brains rotted by worms, but I am of the mind that to be a documentary is to mean something, you know what I mean? I want a little bit of production value in there. I want this thing to have a little bit of officiation, if that makes sense. Basically what I'm saying is DIY documentaries are pretty cool. I've made a couple of them, but they didn't include death videos I found on 4chan as if those were my own documentary work, while providing absolutely no context for that at all. Also, before we even begin, the big disclaimer for all of this stuff always is as follows. You can let this shit affect you or not, and knowing about this stuff will absolutely affect you. Also, understand and be keen enough to know if somebody is showing you a piece of media, they might be doing it for nefarious purposes. They might be doing it simply to fuck up your life or make you feel shitty about existence. You know, a lot of the filmmakers involved in these sorts of deals, they really want to make money. This is understandable. Money is necessary to not die on the street, which is not fair or good. Filmmakers be out here trying to make money off of you by showing you footage of horrible things and trying to manipulate you into action. As an intellectual, we will watch these things and understand them so that we do not walk away from here having terrible, stupid ideas. And with that, some honorable mentions. Okay, Mondo Cane is primitive, exploitative documentary. Like, this is the original one. Now, obviously, there are things that were sort of like this before, but Mondo Cane very much changed the landscape of Italian exploitation cinema completely. Our homies, Jacopetti and Prosperi, are two filmmakers pretty well known for making what I'm going to classify as generally just trying to rile people up to make money. A lot of the footage in Mondo Cane is just dead-ass fake. It's very similar to Faces of Death, which I didn't put on my list because in my opinion Faces of Death is not that great. TM. But Mondo Cane is kind of like Faces of Death if it was slightly more on crack, a little bit more unhinged, if that makes sense. While I really enjoy both Faces of Death and Mondo Cane as trash cinema, I would not in any way recommend them as like really great documentaries about subjects that you should be paying attention to. But don't worry, Jacopetti and Prosperi will be back later on in the list. We will be talking about them again, don't you worry. Now the next thing is like a very short run Netflix series, and you know, fuck Netflix, fuck you Netflix, Netflix sucks. They got that Dave Chappelle bullshit. Fuck you Netflix. That said, Don't Fuck with Cats is kind of cool. It's a documentary about some internet weirdos who found a serial killer on LiveLeak and then stalked stopped him, supposedly. So this all started with sharing around this live leak video of Luca Magnotta killing cats, another video of Luca Magnotta killing cats, and then he like put cats in like a vacuum sealed bag. It was horrible shit. Just not ideal to see with one's retinas. However, there were some brave keyboard warriors who were watching and waiting in the bushes and in the dark to snap and get Luca Magnotta when he eventually killed a person. And then he did eventually kill a person. The One Man, One Ice Pick video, which, if you've seen it, is notoriously not good to watch. It's sort of like if you were having to watch a guy kill another guy. It would suck to, well, that is what the video is, so. Anyway, and then he cut the guy up and mailed parts of him to Justin Trudeau. Very exciting choices by Luca Magnotta. When they brought him in, he recreated the entire scene from Basic Instinct. You know the one where she like shows off her cooter to that whole crowd of people? Basically, he does that, but with his cooter. So Don't Fuck With Cats is disturbing only in if you didn't know that Luca Magnotta was a person and you wanted to consume that in a way that wasn't just watching him kill cats and kill a guy with an ice pick and then read about the rest of it on Wikipedia. It's pretty good. They did catch him while he was Googling himself, which I think is apt. Honestly, if they ever catch me for the murders that I've committed, they will absolutely catch me Googling myself. But alas, they have yet to check the lake. I think I've made that joke on this YouTube channel before. Okay, next up is Cropsey. So check it out. This documentary is about how there was this urban legend in this very specific neighborhood long ago about a child murderer who would get you in the dark. And then it turns out they found the guy and he was real, dude. He was a real guy who actually killed people in the dark and did this for years and no one ever noticed. Isn't that amazing? More or less, it's simply about how amazing it is that this is a real thing. Tis a real thing. Ultimately, I think that the reason that this documentary is very disturbing is because hook hand on door might be real, actually. Okay, I put this on there because I felt like compelled to do so because most internet lists of disturbing documentaries included this, so I'm doing it too. I'm just like the rest of them. Tickled is a film by David Farrier. Now, David Farrier is a New Zealand journalist who's made like a couple of little things. He made a thing for Netflix called Dark Tourist where he travels around and just looks at a bunch of Evil Dead shit and also voodoo, which is kind of rad. But Tickled is kind of his big film thing. He kind of made a big name for himself very quickly with this. The story of a man who has, with wealth, manipulated hundreds of young boys into tickle cells where they are pornographically tickled for this one very specific man's pleasure, not to be sold for any fetish content. And if they fuck with him, he will literally ruin their life. This is, of course, amazing. The idea of a rich man literally like fucking over the youth with tickling is too, I don't know, it's like our pain, their amusement. Oh man, it's so personified. I can't even handle how true it is. If you have a proclivity for intensity, I would say that it's very intense near the end, but I would in no way say that it is disturbing, so honorable mention it is. Next up is Mommy Dead and Dearest. Unfortunately, the little girl's name is Gypsy Rose, which I believe, yeah, I don't know why her mother named her after a slur, but there it is. Anyway, this is the story of a girl who very literally Munchausened by proxy into thinking that she had like a whole myriad of diseases, and they also fooled the public about this for like years and years until eventually she met a guy on the internet who was very weirdly like the Joker and she was like Harley Quinn, and they were both like 15, and this was very, very emo mall goth, and they both wore their trip pants to the mall. Anyway, he came over one day and he murdered her mom. She paid the ultimate price in the public eye for this for many, many years. At what point does an abusive mom be so bad that it's like, maybe just have a boyfriend come over and kill her and that's fine? It's not all that disturbing, really. I mean, it just documents a little girl and her adventures killing her mother. It's not that shocking. The more shocking thing, I guess, is just that parents can just dead-ass lie to doctors and convince doctors that their kids need crazy, weird medicine for no fucking reason at all. all. Okay, and the next thing is Missing 411. I have talked about Missing 411 a couple of times. I find, to be honest with you, that Missing 411 has kind of a weird tie-in with a lot of very specific kind of conspiracy theory shit, and I'm not saying that that specific conspiracy theory shit is QAnon, but I am saying that it is adjacent, weirdly adjacent. It's kind of like the flat earth thing, where it was like, you know, for a long time we were like, oh yeah, the flat earth people are weird, strange, just like the paranormal people or the alien people or whatever. And then it turns out that they're all in the same hole, and that hole is called QAnon. But my point is, Missing 411, I don't know of its motivation. I do know that it is talking about how children have a tendency to go missing in national parks. They go missing without a trace and nobody knows why it happens, and it's happened like a bunch of times. The practical reason here, they are experiencing hypothermia, deal with the mental psychosis that comes with hypothermia, and they're walking into the woods and getting lost, and if they find their way out, it's just purely by happenstance. But the documentary goes as far to say that there is something alluring in the woods that is luring children away from their parents into the woods, stripped of their clothes, go missing, and then reappear later as if abducted by aliens. So the implication is kind of that kids are getting abducted by aliens in national parks, y'all. Honestly, I do think that there's something interesting about this. There is a lot of weird ties to this, and while yes, it can be explained by hypothermia, there's also Missing 411, the sequel called The Hunted, which is all about hunters who go into the woods and go missing, and they're not children. They have mental facilities, and they're not just gonna go get lost in the woods. And if they did get lost in the woods, they would have shit to be prepared to, like, fight anything that they encountered in the woods. Were found not being torn up by animals whatsoever, without their clothes on, months after they went missing, very close by where they went missing. Very strange circumstances. So these have a tendency to be a bit more compelling, in my opinion, than the one with the kids. The one with the kids feels very conspiratorial. This one feels very like, hey, I'm a bit concerned. Why are all my bros getting fucked up in the woods? What is the monster in the woods that is getting them? Well, and then at some point he plays this footage of a fucking guy, dog boy in the woods doing some growly noises, and is like, oh, this is proof that hunters are being killed by Bigfoot in the woods. Now, as you know, Bigfoot works with Q directly. It's also an alien who travels the multiverse. Anyway, my point is, you can immediately fall right off the deep end with this bullshit when really it's just some hikers went missing. Hikers go missing! Now, I'm gonna mention a couple of other things, but these are things that I'm gonna call too saucy for both my list and too saucy for the honorable mention. So we're gonna put them in the watch out category. There is a death photographer, and he made a lot of films. These films are really fucking fucked up, but there's this one called Orozco the Embalmer, which is literally about an embalmer, and then he gets overstressed from his job and dies, and then he too turns into a pile of meat that is embalmed. This is like such a nihilistic experience for many watching it that it's rather difficult. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that the good people out there give this one a shot, but I mean, hey, if you're bored on a weekend, and of course I believe he's also responsible for Akivas der Morte, I think is what that's called, so that sucks. That's just some people dying. And then there's Traces of Death, which is kind of like Faces of Death, which I mentioned earlier. Faces of Death is like an honorable mention only in that it's silly and it's not really a documentary. It's all a bunch of fake bullshit, but it is kind of funny and it has a little bit of a charm and appeal to it. So Faces of Death. But Traces of Death is basically Faces of Death if it was all pretty real and all pretty horrific and graphic. I'm pretty sure Traces of Death is the one that has something to do with the guy who did Girls Gone Wild. I could be wrong on that, but the general vibe is just that, like, hey, did you know people die? It's horrible. Anyway, take a look. There's a lot of like really awful assassinations and shit in these documentaries that you really can't see elsewhere, and you know, maybe you don't want to. Maybe you don't want to. There's some suicides. We love a suicide. Suicides are fun. I know, I've tried a couple of them. I got jokes. We're going to talk about the 10 worstest documentaries. And so when I say the worstest, I basically mean they're just like kind of, they'll hurt your brain a little. Just a touch. They hurt the old brain just a little bit. I'm sorry for the damage that will be done to your brain, but also know that you clicked on this YouTube video. Thus, you deserve it. I'm a big firm believer that all people have have the mental facilities to know what they're getting into. I knew what I was getting into when I was 14 and I saw that guy shoot himself. I feel like we're all kind of in that same sort of ethereal puddle now, where we've all had to deal with it, we've all had to witness it, so now it's time to process it, like good little psychological adults. And so with that, here's 10 very bad things. I'm sorry. Get ready for Just Melvin, Just Evil. So, the big significant piece with Just Melvin, Just Evil, there's two things. Number one is like, there's some genuinely really fucking gruesome depiction of childhood violence in here. There's just victims very openly talking about the things that they experienced and like the dude that did it to them, and also how like the rest of their family kind of weirdly enabled some of these things. And a lot of it is incestual, a lot of it is violent, and a lot of it will make you feel ill in the tummy. Sickness. You'll feel the sickness. It will arise in you. So that's one significant aspect of it. But the other significant aspect, there is a moment where they just dead ass find the guy and are like, hello, we would like to talk to you about the things you did. How would you feel about that? And he, like, because he's in a wheelchair and he's like old as fuck, he like can't run away. So they're just like, hello, my man, why did you rape her? And he's like, I didn't. I'll kick your ass. Oh no. And it's like he's finally receiving his comeuppance. The first half of it definitely has this like very unfortunate thing. Damn, I don't want to have to listen to all of these horrible accounts of the worst thing imaginable. And then the second half, he gets punished, and it's very funny. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Now, there's nothing that's a mixed bag about Night and Fog, the second entry on this list, a documentary about the Holocaust. So essentially, like a filmmaker, I believe it's Elia Kazan, but I could be wrong, is at a concentration camp, and he sees people like taking pictures and treating it like it's a tourist site, and is like, yo, if you knew what happened here. Matter of fact, for the next 30 minutes here, let me just show you all this footage I found of horrible things that happened at concentration camps. And then for the next 30 minutes, you literally just watch with commentary as certain things happen in concentration camps and like real footage. And oh boy, it sucks. I hate it. I didn't like to see it, and I don't like seeing it. When I was a child, I was taken to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and when I was there, I learned many, many wonderful things about horrible human atrocities and genocide. It very much largely changed my brain. I learned also the grim, dark realities of authoritarianism and its sort of long-term effects on people's faces and brains. So, A Night in Fog is a very gruesome documentary, but it's very much that experience, like packaged into a small little package. Everyone should probably watch Night in Fog at some point in their life. You should experience this in a little bit more of a detailed fashion than just Night in Fog, because there's a lot to it, and there's a lot that need to know, things to keep an eye out for in the future, so that marginalized people do not get harmed ever again in such a genocidal fashion, even though that is tendency for the way things go. And I know that as a marginalized person that has left Texas, a place where these things are beginning to happen badly to a lot of people. Very, very scary. Anyway, Night in Fog is super important right now. You need to watch it more or less as like a document of human atrocities and also of the true nature of state power and how fucked up that is when it's in the hands of bigoted monsters. The third film is Jesus Camp. It's about a camp for Jesus. Now, I know you're thinking, Jesus, isn't he that guy from the Bible that's really cool and everyone loves him? That's true. He is that guy. The purposes, the things that are done in his name are not always great. Matter of fact, I would say that many of the things done in Christ's name have been rather questionable, like the indoctrination of a group of children into basically being warriors for God, which is to say they're going to grow up one day and kick a bunch of people's ass for the Lord. And when they say people, they mean brown people. And when they say kick their ass, they mean kill them. So in essence, Jesus Camp is just a film about everybody getting indoctrinated to do the worst imaginable things anyone could ever imagine. And also hearing bold-faced what the purposes of like young earth creationism would end up becoming. See, back at the time, everybody was like gaslighting each other with new words. This is a political action committee. It's not just a religious organization. And then we got to this place now where the bigotry is just on full display and the purposes of it have never been more clear, and yet they're still lying about it. But Jesus Camp is kind of this amazing document of watching this actually unfold while it's unfolding. The indoctrination happens and how that ends up leading to a much later point in their life where they're doing something aggressively violent in favor of politics. So basically, whenever somebody is like, hey, trans woman, why are you in the women's room? We're gonna kill you. That's because they were indoctrinated by this kind of bullshit. Isn't that great? I love that too. Especially when a lot of the kids are clearly very gay and this is conversion therapy for them, and their parents were like, oh boy, we gotta get him in a church or he's gonna turn out to be a transgender Satan. So yeah, the 2000s were great and wonderful, and nothing bad happened at all that led to all of the problems that we face now. Gestures at all the problems. Okay, the fourth film is Hated, the G.G. Allin documentary. I feel like this is the one that I always have to include simply because, like, on a scatological basis, it's kind of amazing. So immediately defaces so much stuff for me, at least. Like, this documentary completely breaks down this, like, punk rock persona for me and is just sort of like, okay, aggressive guy that gets up on stage, yells about his life and yells about society and shit like that. When you see that approach taken, but somebody's just like shitting all over themselves, it has a tendency to just like change the way that you look at the extremes of human behavior. Ultimately, G.G. Allin, birth name was Jesus Christ, which is very funny because he's ultimately someone who believes that he's martyred himself for the good of what, like rock music or something of that ilk. Anyway, he was basically a punk rocker who was known for going around shitting on stage, you know, attacking people, doing heroin, things like that. And I frequently tell this story in prior YouTube videos, but I will briefly mention that one time he came to Dallas and a bunch of my friends went, and they said that it stank to high hell. Pretty much 3 minutes into the show, he like shit, and it was the worst shit ever. Like, the smell was awful, and so everybody began vomiting, and then he kind of just like gave up on the music at some point, got tired, laid down and did some heroin. It was just like a completely dive bomb experience. Imagine paying dollar bills and then that happens. So it's kind of like the necrophilia of capitalism. Yeah, okay, pay me money. Get ready for me to literally just shit on the ground. Entertainment. So in a lot of ways, it's like where punk rock would become this like more or less escapist vehicle for entertainment in a lot of ways, like later on, like pop punk, I feel is strongly representative of this. It's not to say that this was real punk, but this was just the most nihilistic punk. This was the stuff that just like took it directly into the fucking ground. So much so that most punks don't even fuck with it, which is kind of funny. And as someone who I would call myself more or less a cultural anthropologist, I like to look through shit and go, wow. I find G.G. Allin to just be an endless source of wow. Okay, number 5 is The Bridge. This one gets a nice little trigger warning for suicide. If that's something that bothers you, skip to something else. So The Bridge is a documentary. Basically, a guy just set up a camera and just began filming the Golden Gate Bridge and was like, I'm going to capture every suicide, and then I'm going to go talk to the families of the people who committed suicide. And then he does exactly that. So you get to watch like 4 or 5 different people commit suicide jumping off the bridge, which is a very common thing. A lot of people jump off the Golden Gate Bridge every year. He goes and interviews the families of the people that died and asks them, you know, more or less why they decided to do this, when this started, and more or less like what the signs were. And then also asks people who survived their jump, and also talks to people who backed down off their jump and received like some support from like local authorities, which I distrust greatly. There's this whole nuanced situation that goes down when somebody goes to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge, and there's also this whole system in place for dealing with it. Poetic and beautiful thing where these people like just decide like, yep, I'm jumping off this fucking bridge. And sometimes it feels very impulsive, like they just decided to do it, and sometimes it feels deeply premeditated, ego death, and there's a lot of fear, and sometimes there's no fear at all and they're just completely free about it. I think that one thing that is rather difficult for us to see is like people choosing to end their lives and that being like something they're okay with. And while it does hurt the people around them, difficult to watch somebody do that and be okay with it. I've seen a lot of suicide videos, which is not a point of pride. I do not feel proud of this at all. But I've seen some where people are very, very scared, and then other times where people are very, very like jovial and all about it. It is weird to me how it can be both, and more or less us, a documentary has never really portrayed that quite so much as The Bridge. I think the ultimate example of truly understanding the intricacies of suicide. If you would like to understand suicide, might I suggest the documentary The Bridge. Now, moving on to something we would also like to understand, murder. The next film is Dear Zachary, a letter about a boy to his father. No, about a letter about a father to his boy. Anyway, Dear Zachary, a letter to a father about his boy. Father who dies under mysterious circumstances. Okay, he's fucking murdered. But the thing is, like, this guy gets fucking murdered, and then his best friend drives all around the whole country and films everybody that ever knew him talking all kinds of mad praise about him before, you know, Twitter cancels him for doing blackface at a party when he was 17 or something. That joke is a fucking nightmare. Why did I say this joke? Everybody in the whole world was like, yeah, this guy was fucking great. He blew me at a party and we fucking loved him. Oh, he was my bro. He is murdered by a woman who is jealous of the concept of him being with other people, so she just kills him. And then on top of that, she goes to prison. Turns out she's pregnant with his kid. She has this kid, and then the parents of the victim have to interact with the murder lady to get custody of the kid. So they have to, like, befriend Shirley, the murderer, and hang out with her, talk to her on the phone, all kinds of shit, not knowing that she would later kill again. And apparently everybody in any authority was just like, no, she would not do this. She is a nice woman. She would never kill again. Like, yeah, I know that she fucking murdered somebody in cold blood by shooting them in the back 6 fucking times. But no, she's fine. She's good. Don't worry about it. She'll be fine. She's fine. Yeah, Dear Zachary is genuinely probably one of the most miserable films I've ever sat through. I've seen it 3 times, and every time I watch it, I go, woo, that's the last fucking time I'm ever watching that shit. It's a very good documentary. The pace to it it's like heart-wrenching, but at some point it does come around to being a fucking miserable shit show. And when it becomes the fucking miserable shit show, you just want to puke in your soup. It's some bullshit. It's so bad, genuinely, that I don't ever want to watch it again, and people keep fucking making me watch it. Okay, the next film is Africa Addio, or Africa Blood and Guts if you're a stupid American, apparently. Why is it called this? I don't know. I believe Africa Addio is meant to translate to Goodbye Africa, which is yikes. Anyway, there's just so much yikes about this. So remember earlier in the video I was talking about Jacopetti and Prosperi, 2 filmmakers who were bad boys, who did bad boy bullshit. They got into some trouble in Africa, it turns out. They made a documentary film and they asked a dictator at one point to hang a dude for the documentary, and he was like, absolutely. So they filmed a hanging, very literally, that they asked for. So that, I feel like that makes them slightly accomplices in a murder. But then, of course, it's this dictator who's like, well, he deserved it. But what does that mean? What does deserving it? What does deserving it mean when there's a bad authority? And so the Italians who were attempting to talk about how fucked up and terrible Africa is, just on every conceivable circumstance, has a tendency or encourage violence. But encouraging violence is one thing. They're also deeply racist. Now, this is such a problem, like, universally accused by critics after this film came out for hideous racism. Now, understand, this is like the 70s. Like, if a white critic is getting pissed off about racism, it's gotta be really fucking racist. Italy in the 70s, these homies were being criticized for their fucking racism. It was a long ass time ago. So this is some very, very racist shit, dude. But anyway, luckily, they responded to this by making quite possibly the most racist film I have ever seen. The Birth of a Nation is very racist, but understand that Goodbye Uncle Tom, which is not a documentary, even though it disguises itself as a documentary about the antebellum slave era South, is 100% the most racist thing I've ever seen. So basically what I'm saying is fuck Jacopetti and Prosperi. Somebody made a movie about this called Cannibal Holocaust. That's right, Ruggero Deodato made Cannibal Holocaust as a response film to what they did in Africa Addio. The point being that even other Italians think that Jacopetti and Prosperi are pieces of shit, scumbag bastards. Okay, so the next thing is another Netflix thing, which we've already said fuck Netflix, but let's just throw one more little safe fuck Netflix in there. I do not know why I'm so passionate about this, to be honest. These are mostly jokes. Okay, Abducted in Plain Sight is actually pretty rad, though. It's like a documentary film that basically follows follows the world's weirdest kidnapper. Basically kidnaps a little girl and convinces her that she has to have sex with him or else aliens are going to something to something. Puts her in a new environment, traps her there, weird alien cassette tapes. We're aliens, you have to breed with this very specific man, it's to save the world, you've got to do it. So this like little girl has to have sex with this older man for the very specific purpose of having children for the aliens. This is his plan. I know you're thinking, well, that's fucking bizarre. Surely this didn't like actually work. Well, it turns out it did. Covertly manipulating her whole family for this like whole time. Matter of fact, she even like went back to him after leaving him a couple of times. They had this like whole thing for years. He manipulated both her mother and her father, manipulated her mother into sleeping with him. That's right. He was like, I'm Hottie McHotterson and you're Hottie McHotterson. Why don't we be fucking though? Don't you need some relief? Surely your husband's blowing it over there. And turns out her husband was blowing it over there. So they totally fuck. On top of that, one time he's like riding around with the dad and is like, dude, do you ever just want me to just jerk you off, my dude? Yes, please. If we could get with the jerking off, that'd be fantastic. So he manipulated the father by having sex with him. That's right. So we're talking about a kidnapping, crazy pedophile man who has had sex with both the mother and the father and the daughter. And everybody was just kind of weirdly okay with it. So why it's called Abducted in Plain Sight is because very literally he abducted her and then everybody was fine with it. Okay, the next film is called Something Is Wrong with Aunt Diane. I remember this film because it's very, very sad. More than anything, it is about a woman who, apropos of nothing, apparently did some meth, hit some cocaine, smoked some weed, the matter of like 3 minutes outside a gas station, then hit the gas going like full fucking speed in a car full of a family and children going the wrong way down the highway for miles before slamming into a car and killing herself and the whole family. And at no point did anybody stop her or say, hey bitch, are you okay? This is a very strange story. If she was attempting suicide, why did she bring a family with her? And if she was bringing this family with her, why didn't the family like stop her or complain or fight back or do anything whatsoever? Why were they completely okay with it? Why did she do all these drugs? And also, when did she do all these drugs? And also, where did she get these drugs? And also, it's the strangest story because it literally makes no fucking sense whatsoever as to why this happened. Showing footage in the documentary of them pulling these dead children out of this car, like mangled and fucked up. And it's just like a real thing that absolutely happened that killed families. The large question comes down to like, was Aunt Diane mentally ill? Was she suicidal? Was she hooked on drugs? What happened? Nobody can come up with a good answer. Supposedly, she just randomly decided to do a huge cocktail of drugs and made a crazy decision and no one stopped her. One theory goes that she like gotten drugged and also her whole family got drugged all at the same time and then they all kind of made this decision at the same time. So, but there's no real source for where this would have happened, like how this would have happened, who would have done this. So it's like impossible to diagnose what exactly went down and why Aunt Diane killed all these people. And if you don't want to see it, I recommend don't looking at it because it's super bad. And this brings us to our last film. This is a film that, in my opinion, everybody needs to see, but is very, very difficult to see. So you might not be able to, but I believe that it might be on Canopy these days. And if you have a friend who's in a film school and they got a password for that shit, you steal that password, download this film, and share it with your friends. And by that, I mean you should watch it once and then close the browser. Titicut Follies is a film about the mentally ill in asylums a long ass time ago, like in the 50s and 60s. And I don't know if y'all know this, but the mentally ill were not super well treated back then. And so there were a couple variables here. Number one is being mentally ill was an accusation you could throw at somebody to basically end their relationship with society. And then in that asylum, they would usually be abused to the point of absolute insanity. And by insanity, I mean like trauma-based schizophrenia, trauma-based CPTSD, just simply dealing with the fact that they now are torturously living in a prison of absolute hell. So Tickled Follies follows people who at some point became became insane, whether it was in the asylum or prior to the asylum, the guards and their relationship with trying to stamp out aggression. These are very literally the terms that the film is working with. They're not thinking about mental illness as like some kind of nuanced thing that mostly needs like medical treatment or patience, comfort, family, love. They're more thinking about it like, hey, maybe if we beat the shit out of these people and throw them in tiny rooms, then society will forget about them and we can all just move on. And it's like a weird passive eugenics. It's not even passive eugenics, honestly. It's active eugenics, and it's kind of disgusting. And watching it is heartbreaking and brain-breaking. So when I was studying the iceberg for disturbing movies, something I learned was there's really only like 5 things that people will do that are really fucked up and bad. They'll like fuck something gross. They'll like do bodily function shit. They'll like kill a woman or kill a child, or their pedophilia. Shit like that is bad. But statewide torture. It's weird because when you go to the places where Native Americans were genocided, you will learn most places there are white people tourist shops where they sell like fake arrowheads and dream catchers and shit, which is almost worse. It's almost like a disgusting folly in the whole thing. You don't realize that this is the place where babies were cut up and killed by the state, helping out these small business owners get their dream catcher business going, and they're just a bunch of like annoying white people with their coffee. The same is very true of mental illness. Not only did people lose their lives simply for the accusation of being mentally ill, but people lost their livelihoods, their actual sanity over the accusation of this and the mistreatment that came with it. You know, ACAB and shit, but also it's pretty fucked up to put anybody in the position where they have power over someone they deem to be like lesser than them in society. We need to give a little bit of accountability to the state for putting them in a situation where they have to do that kind, or they feel that they have to do that kind of thing, or are expected to do that kind of thing to people they deem to be lower than them on the totem pole of society. If you want to watch how marginalized people have consistently been treated since this time, and how that is only minorly changed or moved around, instead of cleaning up the mess, they just kind of push it over into the closet so that nobody sees. Intense oppression is still very much a thing, awakening experience for people that think they know how things really are, but they really don't know how bad things are for marginalized people. And if they did, it would shock them and scare them. Matter of fact, one of my favorite documentaries is Paris is Burning. Queer stereotype, like every queer person I think has like a soft spot for Paris is Burning. But the saddest part about Paris is Burning is how like every single aspect of that film is still true to today. Like the marginalization, the sadly short lives, blooming love and fun that's found inside queerness that is like a shared secret between other queer people, becoming a home for a lot of people. Sad as fuck to watch it and go, Jesus, queer people are still treated the same way and are still expected to live such short, miserable lives. To get back to Tickled Follies, Tickled Follies is very similar in that it is a living document of this state-level oppression, and nothing else really covers it quite so well. So you probably need to watch it and understand it in the same way that you probably should watch Paris is Burning. I think more than anything, while there are disturbing documentaries in the sense that you can watch somebody die, it's not hard to watch somebody die. Watch somebody suffer with disease, illness, you know, I mean, the Roger Ebert documentary where he lost his jaw. I mean, that's kind of harrowing, right? That's different than the total understanding of state violence against marginalized people, the real horror, the real thing that we have to continually watch out for. One of the big factors that's gonna fuck with us for the remainder of our lives. And oh boy, am I excited for that. It's been lovely talking to you, and I'm so sorry this has been so dour. I feel kind of bad that it's been so dour, my friends. I usually like to make jokes and make everybody happy. It has been a wild couple of months. But if you want to support me, you can check out my book. My book is really naughty and nasty. I want to write a new one. I've been working on it back on and off. I need to come up with the perfect, specific idea to haunt you and your little dreams. So thank you for continuing to watch me. Comment, like, subscribe, help out with the algorithm, go through my older videos and like those as well. I don't know why I've become an Edwardian woman. And also support me on Patreon, patreon.com/nickspheres. That's right. Give me $1. No more, no less. If you give me more, I could grow too powerful and then destroy the world. And if you give me any less than that, then I will starve to death. This is a promise. Look at me. I'm starving. Look at, there's like no fat on this. this. This is a problem. Buy me a fucking burger. Or better yet, buy me coffee. Every time I drink this cup of coffee, something creative happens. So there's an option. You could try that. Also, what videos should I make next? I've been considering doing like a new series. I'd like to do a series on something kind of like a disturbing thing every whatever episode. But I have not yet figured out exactly the format that I'd like. Please comment, let me know. And I will see you very, very soon, my lovelies. Very, very soon. Very, very soon. As a last note, I have an album out. It's called Fish. It's now on physical media, which is pretty cool. You can check that out at also the links in the description. But I'm also on Spotify. That's right. Go over to Spotify and just look up May Leets and you should be able to find me pretty quickly. I am gay. So that's enough of me. I will have a new video after this one very soon. I love you very much. I hope you have a fantastic night and don't find yourself, in any dangerous situations unless you like danger, in which case I trust you completely to deal with that danger in the most violent possible means. Thank you and goodbye.